Emma Ronai-Durning from the Rural Organizing Project. And let me just make a few comments about that. The Rural Organizing Project is a statewide organization that supports a multi-issue, rural-centered grassroots base in Oregon. They work to build and support a shared standard of human dignity. And what that means is that there's a belief in the equal worth of all communities, the need for equal access to justice, and the right to self-determination. Their mission is to strengthen the skills, resources, and vision of primary leadership in autonomous human dignity groups, with the goal of keeping such groups a vibrant source for a just democracy. Now, Emma Ronai-Durning joined the Rural Organizing Project staff in the spring of 2019. Previously, she had for many years organized internships, including documenting rapid response networks built to support undocumented Oregonians. This was so that local organizers could reflect on their work, learn from each other, and make connections across the state. Now based in Deschutes County, Emma can usually be found on the back roads, digging in with group leaders across rural and frontier Oregon about how to build stronger and more powerful groups. Emma, take it away, and we'll jack this up for you, because you're a little taller than I am.
Yeah.
She's a lot taller.
Hello. My name's Emma. I also brought Erica along. Do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Hello everybody, I'm the summer intern for ROP. My name is Erica Oliveira and I'm from Matterhorn.
This is Erica's very first day, so be nice to her. Yay! My name's Emma. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm based here in Bend. So it's really fun to see all of you, see some familiar faces, some new ones, and some people I've just emailed or called or Zoomed with, but now I get to see you in 3 dimensions, which is so fun. I was telling Mimi, I'm very comfortable sitting in a circle chatting with folks, and I do this a lot less often, so I might put you all out of your comfort zone and pass the mic. I want to do some introductions after I share just a little bit about what we're up to hear what you all are most interested in hearing about, and I know you all are doing all sorts of incredible work through the League of Women Voters and probably 17 other hats that many of you wear around the community. So I'm excited to be in conversation with you, and if you hear me say something or don't hear me say something and have a question or want me to repeat, feel free to just interrupt me, throw your hand up, say, what was that? Can you say more about that? I didn't bring slides because I like just being a little bit more free-flowing, and I have a couple things that I know folks are interested to hear about, but feel free to take me on a tangent. I'm happy to do that, and I do have my watch, so I'm going to try and keep a good eye on the time, and we'll go from there. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Sweet. First, we get a little treat. That way. Passing this back. Thank you. That is just a little bit about what happened across the network in 2021. We make one at the end of every year, so feel free to take that home. There's a map inside of all the groups in the network, and I find that sometimes helps folks get a sense of, when we say statewide, we really mean nearly every single county in the state. And we have friends and folks that aren't officially part of the network in the counties that don't have stars on them too. Great. So I'm going to start with how ROP started. There's some folks that have been around ROP much longer than I have, potentially even longer than I've been alive. And so jump in, add things. And then we're going to talk more about what is going on, what has been going on here in Deschutes County, and what the summer is looking like, what we have coming up in the next couple of months. So ROP started in response to an attack on our democracy. In 1992, the Oregon Citizens Alliance put forward a ballot measure that was trying to rewrite Oregon's constitution to make it with explicitly homophobic language. They're saying that homosexuals and conflating them with pedophiles would not be allowed to have access to public resources in any way. And folks really off the bat recognized that this wasn't just about queer people, it was an attack on queer people, but it was an attack on a lot more than that. When you separate out a minority group of any sort and say that this group doesn't deserve the same rights and protections that other groups do, that turns into who else gets pushed out of the table, who else is not allowed to be in the room. And we've seen that up to today with all sorts of other scapegoats in our communities. And right now, we're actually seeing queer folks become a target again in a way that is remarkably similar to the 90s. I don't know if you all have seen around town the kill all pedophiles stickers on people's trucks, but it's really remarkably similar to 1992. So this ballot measure was put forward by this group that had funding from out of state, and folks all across Oregon were saying, we gotta do something. This is not okay. We don't wanna see this kind of language on flyers, on banners outside the post office or outside of the grocery store when I'm going about town. This is bad for our communities, and it's bad for me or my family or whoever else, my neighbors. And there was a campaign called the No on 9 campaign that was based in Portland and was pushing back and creating some response to it. But many folks in rural communities had this experience of reaching out and saying, hey, I want to do something. I live in Clatskanie, I live in Bend, I live in Port Orford, wherever they might be. And the campaign was like, great, yeah, you could come to Portland and help us knock on doors. You could send us money. And for better or for worse, that was their plan, was we're gonna focus on Portland. People are densely populated and probably gonna be against this, and so that's what we're gonna do. And they left out all of these progressive folks that live all over the state and were feeling the impacts really directly in small towns and rural communities. And so people from different parts of the state that were getting the same message got together and said, you know what, we gotta do this on our own. We're gonna make it happen. We don't want to recreate the wheel in every small town. Let's work together. Let's learn from each other, and do our own campaigning against this ballot measure. And those conversations led to the Rural Organizing Project. So this is our 30th year in existence. 30 years ago, out of that campaign, folks said, you know what? We won this fight. No on 9 was successful. That ballot measure did not change the Oregon Constitution. We don't have that particular homophobic language in our Constitution. I don't know if there's other stuff in there. But we know that's not the end of it. There's going to be other attacks. People are going to be targeted in other ways. Our democracy doesn't include lots of people already. And what can we do to stay in community, stay connected, and out of a rural caucus and strategy session, which I'm going to talk about this year's caucus in a couple minutes, folks said, you know what? We should start an organization. We should be networked for the long haul because we know that this work isn't going to be over tomorrow. We have a lot to do, and we want to stay in community around it. So that is the short version of how ROP came to be, and I think it is helpful if someone specifically asked me to share that, but it also is helpful in describing what we do, because since we really haven't changed much since the very beginning, folks are locally rooted, running their own groups in a volunteer-based way, so very similar to the League of Women Voters, sometimes scrappier and like 5 people that are meeting outside the post office, and other times it's 100 people in a church or in a community center or something. But volunteer, locally rooted, and getting connected through the network with folks in other parts of the state that are working on similar issues. So whether that's to us LGBTQ inclusivity, whether that's immigrant justice work, if it's gun violence, whatever the issue might be that feels most pressing at the time, our role as the 4-person staff team is to make sure that people are connected and make sure that we are sharing the lessons that are being learned all over the state. And some of that is really just like, oh, you want to do a petition? Like, have you never done a petition before? Let me connect you with this group in this other county that's done that before, and they can share what went well and what they maybe wouldn't want to repeat. And other times that's more focused on how a group can be successful for the long haul. So you all have meetings. Meetings are great. It's very helpful to have a meeting for your group. Not all groups are meeting regularly, and that can make it really hard for them to do the work that they need to do. Other groups, maybe they just got started, they're having a bunch of meetings, but they don't have a communication system at all, and they have no email list, and so they just they get together, and then it's hard to figure out how the work moves forward. So we do a lot of problem solving with folks about what are your stumbling blocks, what are your barriers to success, and how can we help you in being successful in whatever your work looks like. So we have like a template database, and we talk folks through how to build a campaign based on what people feel like they're missing and need most in their work. That can be kind of vague though. I think some of you maybe are like, so what do you actually do? So I wanted to give you a couple examples of what that specifically looked like here in Deschutes County. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh yeah, just 2 more pieces. We're always like welcoming new folks into the network. So oftentimes we start supporting a group because something happens in a community. So like in 2017, the regional jail in the Gorge called NORCOR, Northern Oregon Regional Correctional Facility, was detaining people for ICE under a contract, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And that the people that were being detained there were saying, you know what, this is not okay. They were being moved from a private detention facility out of retaliation for organizing and trying to get conditions that were reasonable and safe in Northwest Detention Center. They were moved to NORCOR so that they couldn't keep organizing. They weren't having access to outdoor time nearly at all. They were eating like a couple slices of white bread as their meal for the entire time that they were there. And the list can go on and on. They didn't have access to socks, like basic things. And so they decided to go on hunger strike. And folks in the community were like, whoa, we need to support this. How do we support this? It's happening tomorrow. And so ROP folks came in and offered like, what do you need? What can be most helpful? And we're able to set up support for the folks on the inside that were organizing this hunger strike inside of the jail, and on the outside who are trying to figure out support for the hunger strikers and amplifying their message through the media, through communication with clergy folks and local leaders, through lawyers, and trying to support with a lawsuit, and you can go on and on, all the different pieces. But so that's one example of like something happens, it feels urgent, people want to take action, and we can support in that way. And then there's also sometimes when a group doesn't exist already, but individuals reach out and say, hey, we want to be in community, we want to do something, but our town, I don't think there's anything going on. Do you know what's going on? And we can connect folks to a group that already exists, or put people together that haven't yet started something, but like the right people at the right time can help start a group. So Redmond is one of the towns where folks, I don't know if you know this story, but when George Floyd was murdered in 2020 and people all over the country were rising up and responding to the Movement for Black Lives' call to action, there were folks that wanted to do something in Redmond, and we got 3 or 4 different people reaching out saying, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I want to do something. Where do you suggest I start? And so we were able to put those folks together into a group, and that turned into Redmond Collective Action, just because folks reached out to us and, I mean, had all these skills that they were bringing into that.
And they're a great group.
And they're a fantastic group.
And they're young. It's wonderful. They're young people. Oh, they're just wonderful group.
maybe saying, and they're young and they're wonderful. Okay. So I would love to hear from you all. Just sharing your name, your pronouns, what community you're coming from. I know folks are from all over the county. I know one person was visiting or like somewhat maybe moving here from Seattle. So I'd love to get a sense of like who all is in the room and where are you coming from in a short version, like keep it to a sentence so it's not the whole hour. And then I would be really curious to hear what motivates you to take action in support of democracy locally. Because you're all here, and the League of Women Voters is all about making sure that democracy keeps running. So I'd love to hear, that doesn't have to be like, just like, why are you here? What brought you to this group? What motivates you to keep coming back? So there's a lot, you could be doing a lot of other things at noon on whatever, Tuesday, Thursday, whatever day over the
You want me to
week is.
handle the mic?
Yeah.
Well, I'm Don, and I just facilitate the League of Women Voters thing, so.
And why do you do that? You could have said no. You could have stayed in bed.
Well, I've been a member for the League of Women Voters for a long time. My wife was very active before she passed away a couple of years ago. But it's a nonpartisan group that's very important, and therefore it can really take a stand on issues. And the issues just happen to be the ones that I have a strong opinion about. So that's it.
Strong opinions. I love it.
Somebody back over here? No, somebody else.
I can't stand up anymore. I'm Mimi Trumbull. I live in Redmond, and I love League of Women Voters because I'm all about things being fair for people. I don't care what it is. It needs to be fair and just, and it's a group that does facilitate that for everyone, not just for a small group of people.
Okay. Somebody else?
Just pass it. Yeah.
Lynn Connolly, and I actually live in the county. I don't live in the city. We've been here since 1999, and I feel like in this day and age, I'm almost afraid of my neighbors. You're afraid to know what their politics are. Indivisible has a group that I'm peripherally involved with, which is the rural-urban divide. So the rural aspect of this talk attracted me. Thank you.
I'll go. I'm never for lots of words. I'm Carol Leshy. I'm a child of the 60s, therefore I'm still an activist. I really don't have anything else to add to that. I found out yesterday that the League of Women Voters nationally has over 500,000 people and over 700 leagues. So if you're not a member, sign up.
Who else?
Yeah.
And then you.
I'm Susan Ackerman, grew up in a town of 900 in the middle of nowhere, literally in South Dakota. So these rural issues are still very important to me. I love the League of Women Voters, and I love what you guys are doing because I think this is the only thing that's gonna save us, so.
Hi, I'm Molly Forster, and I'm involved in a whole bunch of things, some political, some not, in terms of nonprofits and things like that. And I was trying to decide whether or not I became involved in League of Women Voters because of anger or fear or passion, but I think it's all three of those.
I'm Terry Reynolds, and also a child of the 60s and activist since I was 12. And I have met Emma before, and one thing I want to say about ROP, I was involved back in the 90s when the ballot measure 9, and we formed a group for human rights in Gresham, where I was, which was at that time a small community, and did a lot of work and got connected to ROP, and it just was the organization that truly helped us flourish and expand, and the workshops that were all over the community. I led some workshops long ago, but I think it's really heartening to me to see two young people with ROP, and we need young people to be the activists like some of us were in the 60s and beyond.
I think some people have already alluded to it, but to help you cover, how did the rural part, where did that come in? But maybe, is there anybody else who wants to?
Yeah. We got time.
Okay, we'll make it quick.
Yeah.
So it all started in a little. I'm Joyce Durbin, and I joined the league because, and it did not disappoint, that there's so many new things to learn, that maybe I was asleep in civics class or whatever, but we have learned so much. And there's so many workshops that right now we're considering developing, so that we can also educate and bring in to our group younger people, and starting in the high schools and community colleges. So that's kind of the direction I'm hoping that we go.
My name is Laurel Sorley. It's hard to say together. And I grew up in a small town in North Dakota. Kind of makes us, we lived for many years in Minnesota and moved here about 20 years ago. In Minnesota, I was very involved with a number of nonprofit organizations on boards and that kind of thing. And I guess saw the need for all kinds of involvement by the community in keeping a community vital and such. The recent happenings, our political happenings, certainly I think has attracted many of us to be more involved in the league. Just the appearance that our rights are disappearing forever, perhaps, it's hard to know. But one of the things I have appreciated that the Rural Organizing Project has done, that I have appreciated, is before an election, it will put out a flyer that talks about its issues.
I brought some.
Yeah, okay. And that has been really handy to hand out to friends and such. So.
Can I take it back for just a second? I just want to make sure, Emma, do you want this back now, or are you ready to go ahead? Okay. How about just pull it?
I want to hear from everybody.
Hi, I'm Barbara Chella. I have not been to one of these meetings before, but I have my T-shirt. I'm partly here because of all this frustration, et cetera, panic. And I like the idea that this is nonpartisan. I think the walls are so huge between the two major sides that it's sort of not functional. There's no in between, whereas I see this as kind of in between.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Carla Borowitz, and I'm going to keep my mask on though. And my husband and I came to this community. We've been visiting it quite a bit from Seattle. We came down here to wait out the pandemic, and we rented a place in Sun River, and we ended up buying a place there in fall of 2020. And we're starting now to spend more time in this community, although I still have a residence in Seattle, and I run my businesses out of Seattle. We're here. I've been an activist in Seattle in multiple nonprofits, many of them in the women's, especially in the YWCA and some of those. And I've also done some activism down at the borderlands in El Paso. And I think the Rural Project is interesting to me as well, especially with immigrant rights. And so now here, I just want to get more involved in the community. I think these rural areas are so important to our democracy. And I also agree, I'm glad that this is nonpartisan because I just think there needs to be more virtue in the way we treat each other. and that is with wisdom and temperance and justice. And I think, I was disappointed I should have worn my 1973 t-shirt. And I think, women's rights right now, I've always been a fighter for women's rights. Early on an executive that, was only women at the table. And so I think right now we're being attacked again with our rights. So I think, I wanted to see and recruit more women to come to this league, because I think, where women's rights are, goes everybody else's rights. And so I'm very excited to be involved with this organization. Thank you.
I'll take it back. See who else. Did you want to speak?
Yes. I don't have much to say.
We're good for a second.
Well, I'm a native of Bend, Oregon. I was born and raised here. I went to Ogilvy at this time. And my grandfather came here and homesteaded, and it's been a country, the farm. And my thing with League of Women Voters is I was working in the clerk's office, and I ran for office and was elected county clerk. And the League of Women Voters were always good on helping. At that time, that was before vote by mail. It was when you actually went to the polling places. And a lot of people still wanted to go to the polling places sometimes. But we had a fight to get vote by mail. It was, the Democrats didn't want it 1 year. The next legislative session, the Republicans didn't want it. And you had to go back and forth. And when vote by mail came in, and the safeguards of Oregon's vote by mail, when you look at the countries, what they have in their different rules and regulations. Oregon has the clerk in the valley has had trouble. That's been an oddity, and she's kind of odd anyway. This isn't public, but and so I went because I wanted to hear the candidates. I wanted to hear what the people said, give an opportunity to the public, not to the newspaper, not to the news thing, to give an opportunity for somebody could sit down and ask the candidate a question, and that way you found out a lot more information on what the candidates really stood on various decisions that were made and how they felt about different laws and regulations, because you had the chance to ask them instead of their pamphlets.
And now they won't show up.
I've told her that I think she ought to write a book about the vote by mail. That's quite an adventure.
I just wanted to mention thank you for all the years of doing what you did, as well as you did. Thank you.
Now, I don't want to cheat our speaker out of her right. Would you like to take it back for a while?
I'd love to hear from April. I think we just have a couple
It's
more
up to
votes.
you. You're the boss here.
I have plenty. You don't want to.
Somebody in the back row here? Yes, go ahead.
My name's Anna Henson, and I became a League of Women Voters member when I moved from Chicago to Roseburg. And it was a marvelous organization for someone who felt like they were in the Peace Corps or something like that. And then I joined this League of Women Voters in 1973. I was active for a few years, had a career, etc. And in November 2016, I renewed my membership. And I think that's enough to say.
Hi, I'm Mandy Seeley, and I use she, they pronouns. And I moved to Sisters from Florida about 6 years ago. Don't tell anybody. And I have at least 5 life experiences and identities that are discriminated against on a daily basis. So I joined to learn everything I could to be a more powerful activist. And as you know, Sisters is a very small community, and my vision is bigger than that. So thank you. This is my first meeting.
I'm Andrea Barnes, and I joined the league a couple years ago. But today's meeting, I was very intrigued by the subject matter, never having heard of the Rural Organizing Project. So I'm here to learn more, which, thank you, I already have. Appreciate it.
I'm Carol Catarato, and I spent my youth having way too much fun. And so when I retired, I decided I need to find out who's running the world, and that's how I got involved, basically. So, haven't been involved very long. Well, maybe a little longer.
Yeah.
What's not very long?
It's not very long.
I don't want to answer that.
She's been here a while.
Somewhere between 100 and 2.
No, she has held a number, okay, whatever, she's been on the board. So, she's just not telling. I'm Kim Scott, I am the voter service chair now that Susie said, oh my God, enough of it. And thank God she's helping me. Now it takes 4 to 6 people to do what Susie did on her own. So it's quite the job. I'm loving it. It's complicated, and putting a little note out there, we're looking at doing the local ballot measures. So if someone's, however many ballot measures there are locally, we would love to get like 1 person per ballot measure to really go and in-depth, and then we will do a forum basically stating what these are that will be recorded. So if people are interested, look for that email. It'll be coming once we know the ballot measures. We'll be doing that and also the state. Getting ready already for our upcoming candidate forums and our governor's debate, which we will be doing September, I believe, the 10th or the 11th?
October 11th.
October 11th, excuse me.
Well, they haven't accepted it because we haven't sent the letter, so this is hush-hush.
Okay, hush-hush, sorry. I thought the letters went out yesterday, but anyway, that's just me. But anyway, I hope you guys can all be part of that. We need as much help as we can, especially because we're gonna go live and going to different places instead of just being Zoom. We will also have a Zoom situation. But anyway, thank you for this. It's been very interesting, and I apologize for being late. I was on a meeting for voter service. So anyway.
Here's Corlin.
Hi, I'm Corlin. I've been a member of the League of Women Voters since 1972. I joined back east. I've been in a few different places, and I've always been a member. And I'm a member here, and I'm very concerned about the rural issues. That's very important to me, so I'm glad to see that there is this organization. Also, I'm a member of this church. We have a very strong social justice program and committee, and everything that she says fall right into line with the activities that we promote and like to do. Thank you.
Emma, perhaps you could ask how many people are not familiar with your program, because I
I
know
think the
about
teacher
it
would
until today.
Okay, I'll be back on the mic. What did you just say?
Perhaps you could ask how many people are not familiar with your program. This is my first exposure.
Yeah, raise your hands. Cool. Well, it's good to meet all of you. Hope we can stay connected after this too. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's not how your presentations normally go, but it's really nice just to hear what brings you here, what motivates you. Our whole mission is to, make it possible for people to take action and make the change that they want to see at the local level. And so I'm always most interested to hear from you all instead of just hear myself talk. So a couple stories from Deschutes County. How do I want to put this? The work that we do, and I think this was maybe clear from the stories I already shared too, but is really rooted in the people that are most affected by the issue or the struggle or the challenge in our communities should be the ones at the core of figuring out what the solutions are and making those happen. So that is always true in the work that we do, and one of the stories I wanted to share kind of historically from Deschutes County that maybe you all have been aware of is in the early 2000s, Bend was the first community east of the mountains to pass an equal rights ordinance. Does anyone remember when that happened? Yeah? What do you remember about it?
Not a whole lot. It was basically in the news and the counselors were going after each other about it and, you know, yay. I mean, we won, so.
Yeah, we won. So that came out of a hate crime against a queer person here locally who was at a bar. And folks in the community got together and said, oh, we gotta have some response. This can't go and just get swept under the rug. And so the people who were impacted by this decided, let's do a movie night. They hosted Not in Our Town, which is a documentary about responding to hate crimes. And out of that came this conversation around an equal rights ordinance. And it took a lot of work. And folks in the Human Dignity Coalition was the main group at that time that was pushing this forward that we were working with. I know they were a coalition, so in conversation with lots of other folks in the community. But they took this equal rights ordinance, which cities had been passing in other parts of the state, and used it as an opportunity to broaden the conversation just from just the people that were directly impacted by this one incident to the folks that said, yeah, I want to come to this movie night, I want to know more, to a community-wide conversation. So maybe you didn't hear about the movie night, but you heard about the equal rights ordinance. And that kind of thing, I mean, you all probably have passed those ordinances. Does it have an impact, like day to day, you walk out your door and you're like, oh, this ordinance is passed? Maybe not so much, but it's an opportunity to have this community-wide conversation, to put city council on record to say, yes, we support equal rights. And they were able to really fill the city council chambers. They held this meeting when they were going to be voting on the ordinance in, I think it was the Tower Theater or some bigger space, because there were so many people that wanted to be there. And Human Dignity Coalition brought folks together, not just from the queer community, but from business owners, from folks in all sorts of locations around the community. Probably reached out to League of Women Voters. I don't know if anyone was here at that time. I don't know the story there. But brought folks together from all over the community, and in that space we're able to share why it was so important to do this. And there's Bruce Morris, who's one of our board members, I remember very vividly, told me that after hours of this testimony of people saying why it was important to support this equal rights ordinance, one of the city councilors shared, I didn't know that we had discrimination in this town. I didn't realize that this was something we needed to do, but after tonight, I understand that we have to do this. And I understand that I have a lot more learning to do. And so it was this really powerful moment where Ben came together and did this, won this victory, thanks to folks organizing in response to a specific negative incident, and made a positive difference. So that was in 2003, or early 2000s, I believe it was 2003. The next one that I wanted to share was the Where's Walden campaign. Is anyone familiar with that? Was anyone there? Were you there? What's your familiarity?
Well, I remember we wanted to know where he was. And other senators come, they have a whole state, they come very regularly. But he was not showing up. He never did.
And he never did. So Walden, U.S. Representative Walden is no longer in office. Currently, Cliff Bentz is in that same position.
And not showing up.
And not showing up. But in the 2010s, Occupy Wall Street was started in 2011. Folks all over Oregon were doing occupations of some sort. And so folks said, you know what? Why don't we occupy Walden's office? He never comes here. He never shows up. When he shows up, it's like, oh, in 2 hours I'm gonna be at this coffee shop. And oftentimes had never come to Bend, hadn't come to see folks in Medford. He was only in invite only, I'm gonna talk to the head honcho of this farm bureau or whatever, and didn't let folks come and actually speak with him. And what was your name? Annis was saying, all the other, Jeff Berkeley, Ron Wyden, all the other senators and representatives show up all the time and hear from people and actually seek to represent the people that they're supposedly representing. So people were really frustrated that he was not listening. And so they came up.
He showed up elsewhere. He showed up elsewhere in the state. It was just in Bend that he didn't show up, if I remember correctly. Isn't that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he's from Hood River, so he had been in a couple other like super small towns and hadn't come to Bend. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So they held this big action where they were demanding to see Walden and took Where's Waldo, the guy, the red and white stripes, and put Walden's face on top of it and made an actual cardboard cutout of him for the actions. The photos are fantastic. I can probably dig one up to show you. But so they took their Where's Waldo, Where's Walden, and did a protest over at Peace Corner, but then marched over to his actual office and sat in. And these folks that were over 60, maybe all of them were over 70 years old, got arrested sitting in Walden's office saying, "We want to meet you. We want to talk to you one-on-one. Is that so hard?" And the news reports from those days are really powerful, because I don't know if this has been your experience, but I often see when folks do a direct action like that and do a sit-in, oftentimes like, oh, the violent protesters, or oh, this unreasonable thing, but they have these photos of people in their 70s or 80s saying, we just want to talk to our representative here. And so the news really did a good job of using their talking points, which I'm sure was also on the to the benefit of the folks that were talking to the media, doing a good job of sharing the story they wanted to put out. And the media just took him out for lunch. He didn't show up that day, but I think laid the groundwork for a lot of the work that sounds like you all have been doing in terms of trying to get Walden out of office, delegitimizing his position, and yeah, in all the ways that we can as issue-based organizations. But as somebody mentioned, Cliff Bentz is currently in office, so we'll have to figure out some Where's Bentz equivalent pun.
Where's Benzo?
Where's Benzo? Yeah, there's certainly more work to do there, but just wanted to share, sometimes it can feel, to me at least, like, okay, we're gonna march on a street corner, we're gonna do a petition, or these things, and sometimes those creative actions will stick in people's heads, will get more attention, or maybe you're just more fun, and people wanna come and have fun together, and so in these moments, particularly when we're like, okay, is COVID okay? Are we coming out? What's going on? And people are really struggling in our communities. Sometimes, if you do it right, having some action that's kind of poking fun at someone or creative in some way can help people feel motivated to stay active and get involved or stay involved. That was number 2. Okay, maybe I had one more historic one, but since we don't have a ton more time, I'll share just a little bit about what's going on right now and then talk about the caucus and what's to come. Does that sound good? Okay. So, in terms of groups that are specifically members of ROP, we are very kind of loose. Like, anyone's welcome at all of our stuff. So what's happening in the network at any one time is often amorphous. But most of the groups that are particularly active in our network in Deschutes County right now got started around the movement for Black Lives Call to Action in 2020 when George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. And so many groups were just like, we need to take to the streets, we need to be out in public and visible. And those protests led to groups that you all may be familiar with, such as the Central Oregon Peacekeepers, Redmond Collective Action that I had mentioned earlier, the Helpers, Deschutes County DSA, or Democrats Socialists of America, have also been pretty involved in that kind of work. And the piece that has been powerful to see coming out of that, and is true in many communities across the state, has been that folks who maybe hadn't been active before said, this is my time, I gotta do something. And then turn that energy from, we're out protesting on the street, which is great and is very important, into longer term work. And so in Deschutes County, many of those groups started working on mutual aid, started working on distributing resources, and that started, particularly kind of kicked off by Central Oregon Diversity Project in doing a water drive for Warm Springs, the first time that maybe not the first time, the first recent time that their water system broke and people had a boil water notice. Central Oregon Diversity Project collaborated with Redmond Collective Action to pull folks together and throw in, supplies, water, but also things that people could eat that they didn't require cooking with the water that they weren't able to use. And that's kind of spiraled into mutual aid projects in Redmond, in Bend, in multiple places, and Madras and Warm Springs as well, focused more specifically on folks that don't have housing, getting food distributed, water on hot days, warm blankets and tents and coats and things that people needed in the cold weather. When the smoke was really bad, working on trying to open smoke shelters. And then when vaccines became available, trying to get vaccines, getting folks like pet care and working with folks that do veterinary services to support the pets of people that had lost their housing or hadn't been housed for a long time. And now, things are always evolving. And so one of those groups, the Helpers, has turned that focus around food and access to basic needs into starting a bison ranch. And you might be like, what? How does that connect? This group is led by Native people, and they are not from Warm Springs, but have made really strong connections with people in Warm Springs because they've been working to reconnect with their tribes. They were disconnected through, long story of colonization, disconnecting people from their cultures. And so that's been a really important piece for them personally. And so in their organizing work, they found this opportunity to work on food sovereignty and to make bison available again to Native people in Warm Springs and that they were connected to, because they're like, we can be handing out food on the weekends, but that's not going to solve the root problem here. Food is not accessible. People are disconnected from the land and from their cultures, and this is one way that we can have more of a systemic approach to the work that we are really motivated by. So check out the Helpers. They have a website now. Some of these groups are more ad hoc and it's harder to find them, but if you're interested in getting connected, happy to reach out to them and make those connections. Helpers is one of the groups you can actually find online. And then KPOV is also a member group, so community radio. I know someone was like, what's going on with rural media? Community radio has been a big focus of folks in our network, just as people are seeing, if you lose your newspaper, as Ben Bulletin went bankrupt, how many years ago that was now, people were really worried, and in many other communities are worried about not having access to basic information about what is going on at city council meetings or county commission meetings, or with, name the issue. How are you getting information if you don't have a local newspaper or a community radio station? And in many other communities, they maybe had one, but it was bought, in Medford, it was bought by a multinational corporation that didn't care what happened in the local town. They were using it as a test case for how they could take the media and give inaccurate information and make people more afraid of their neighbors than they already were. So people all across the state now, in our network at least, really focus on how can we support community media and staying strong at the local level. How can we build new community radio stations? There's 3 or 4 new stations in the network that are just getting built out or that are expanding in the next couple of years. And how do we work with existing media to make sure that they have, maybe there's a newspaper, but if they have an editor and that's it, then how are they going to be able to do good storytelling or to share strong information with the community? And so can we partner? Can we do a column on a weekly basis? Or can we send you articles that we think are really important for the community to hear about. There's all sorts of different ways that folks are working on that, but KPOV we're so lucky to have KPOV in the community, and I was just talking to someone that I think is with that's organizing this March for Our Lives event that is like, I was talking about it on my radio station on KPOV this week, and it's trying to get the word out that way. So community radio is such a powerful medium because you don't have to have a computer. You don't have to even be a strong reader. You don't even have to have time to like sit down and read something. You can listen as you're driving to work, or you can listen when you're working if somebody else has a radio. So that's been a really fun part of like, how do we distribute information and start conversations over the airwaves. They're great when natural disasters hit too. You can nerd out about radio all day. Okay, 4 more minutes. So, I mentioned the Rural Caucus and Strategy session at the beginning. This year, we're hosting the caucus in Redmond, and it's going to be on Saturday, June 25th. So if you are interested in bringing what you all are working on from the League of Women Voters or any of the other hats that you wear, you're certainly more than welcome to come. I have a little bit of info that you could take home or a registration form. That's a space where folks from all over the state gather together for one day every year to strategize about what's coming up, what's going well, what have we won in the last year, what are the challenges we're running up against, how can we learn from each other in different parts of the state, what are the ways that we might want to collaborate in the year to come. And so the whole day is really like, we have very little of this and a lot of circles, a lot of people talking in all directions about what they're seeing, what they're experiencing. Because, I mean, we believe that it will take all of us to, like, if we had a solution, we would have fixed the things already. So we need every single person in the room to share their little piece of the puzzle and be able to find the best solutions and win all of the things that we want to win.
Is that just for local and state issues?
No. Certainly most of our groups are locally rooted, but you know, when the issue requires a federal solution, then people love to collaborate and figure out ways to win on the federal level. And I know some folks are often kind of frustrated with what you can do at that level, but there are obviously pieces that we can't do at the state because it's a federal decision, right? So it's whatever people want to use the space for. And we spend a lot of the spring, like we have been since basically February, talking with folks all over the state about what they most want to see on the agenda. So if you're like, oh, we really want to talk about this thing, then let me know. And we can see how it fits in with what everybody else wants to talk about. Do you have something in particular that you're thinking of?
No.
Okay. Yeah, let me know. Yeah, we try and, you know, it's 150 people from all over at 36 counties, so we try and see where the overlaps are, and can't make every single person happy, but we try and make as many people happy as possible. And you know, if maybe we can set you up at lunch with somebody that wants to talk about that thing if it's not in a session on its own. Yeah.
It used to be that the urban areas in Oregon were Willamette Valley, it's Portland South, possibly to Eugene, and that's the urban areas. What is Bend now? Are we considered a rural area, or are we considered urban?
That's a great question.
Want to repeat the question so people can?
Yeah, so Susan was saying it used to be that Portland to Eugene or Portland to Salem was considered urban Oregon and everywhere else was rural. And what does Bend count as now? I think that's up for discussion. We, as an organization, basically will work with anybody outside of the Portland area. And if you're like slightly adjacent, then we might love to connect with you, but wouldn't maybe dig in quite as deeply. Our kind of rule of thumb is that the groups or people that are furthest away from urban areas or furthest away from movement resources, so if there's another organization that's actively working in that area, then we trust that they can do a great job, and we try and support folks that don't have access to that. So it's kind of the scale. So there's a couple things at the caucus that I would love to, whether you want to come or not, there are also things that are kind of coming up in the next couple of months. And the first one is that, as I said before, ROP's turning 30 this year. And so we have put together an exhibit just reflecting on what are the big lessons that we've learned over the last 30 years? What are the issues that are coming up again, or the ways that we're seeing the far right mobilize or organize that we can learn from decades ago, what they did before that we knew how to counter then, or that we missed countering then that we should try and do this time, because history is cyclical and it's oftentimes the same people that are coming back out of the woodwork. I don't know if you all saw Bill Sizemore was on the ballot for governor. He's been around a long time trying to pass terrible, terrible ballot measures. So some of it is new faces, some of it is old faces, and it felt like this moment where we could really reflect on what have we learned and how can we take that into what's happening right now, but also how do we envision a world 30 years from now? Where do we want to be? And if we aren't thinking that far ahead, then we're probably never going to get there. So let's do some dreaming together. Let's do some imagining of what we could be living in, and then we can plot out how we get there. So if you all are interested in that conversation, or if you are interested in hosting the exhibit, it's going to be available to travel all over the state and spark conversations like I just described. So you're more than welcome, or any other League of Women Voters chapter that you have friends in, would be more than welcome to host that, or to collaborate with other folks in the same area that are interested in hosting that.
How will you publicize that? How will you publicize that so that we know when it's coming?
If you're interested in helping host, I have a flyer I can hand you right now. If you're not, you should get on our email list so that when it comes to when it comes to Bend, we would probably have an announcement through our email list. And signing, yes, Erica has the sign-in sheet. So if that hasn't come around to you, you could put a little star by your name exhibit, and we can do it that way. And then the stand guide that you mentioned, this is a stand election guide from 2020. We put them out every 2 years that lays out information about the statewide ballot measures, as well as a couple articles just breaking down whatever the kind of biggest topics that are coming up in the election are. So sometimes that looks different every year. In 2020, we did a little bit of COVID safety stuff just to spread information, because folks said that that was going to be helpful for their work. We offer this to groups to order however many you want to be able to distribute door to door, or at your events, or however else you are interested in distributing them. So if you want to order some, this is obviously not the one that you would get, but I wanted to bring an example of what it could look like. You're welcome to do that, and since you live in Bend, it's easy. You can just stop by and I will hand them to you. We don't even need to mail them your way. It's next to the bottle drop. We might be moving soon, but that's currently where we came from today. In the Sunlight Solar Building, if anyone knows where that is. Okay, I think I should probably stop there. I would love to continue the conversation. I have business cards if you have to run out, or if you want to just grab me, happy to talk. However, about whatever you are most interested in talking about. I also would just love to put a little plug in that if you all have money that you're willing to contribute today, we are run by grassroots donations. And so that allows us to be able to do the work that we do and not have to try and spend all of our time collecting foundation grants or figuring out other ways to fund our work. So really appreciate, literally $1 goes a long way. So anything that feels good to you, we would really appreciate. Thank you.